How excited is Shane Beamer for 2025 with the Gamecocks and his quarterback LaNorris Sellers? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. We are going to catch up with head coach Shane Beamer of the South Carolina Gamecocks. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers who are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. All right, today's show is very much for South Carolina fans. We will get a one-on-one interview with head coach Shane Beamer of the Gamecocks, but I'm hoping for other SEC fans, you will also appreciate the interview. A guy who was maybe entering the hot seat territory after missing a bowl game in 2023, but bounced back in a big way this past season, nearly making the college football playoff as one of the hottest regular season teams down the stretch of the year. But Shane was in Houston just the other night. We were able to catch up with him at the Bear Bryant Awards, which is given out every year to one of the best college football coaches in all of college football, presented by the American Heart Association. And, of course, it's the Paul Bear Bryant Awards, the namesake of the great Alabama head coach. It was the 39th annual awards, and the honor actually went to Marcus Freeman, head coach of the University of Notre Dame. They are the only college football coaching honor that's given out after the national champion has been determined. So, they kind of take the whole season into account. But despite losing the national championship the other night, Marcus Freeman did win the award. But other coaches who were in attendance, Fran Brown from Syracuse, of course, the former Georgia and Kirby Smart assistant, he was recognized as their newcomer of the year, while former Georgia head coach Mark Richt was recognized as the recipient of their Heart of a Champion Award for 2025. But among the Coach of the Year finalists, you had Marcus Freeman, you had Rhett Lashley at SMU, Jeff Monken at Army, Steve Sarkisian from Texas, Kenny Dillingham from Arizona State, Spencer Danielson from Boise, Kurt Signetti from Indiana, and, of course, Shane Beamer, University of South Carolina, where his dad, Frank Beamer, was a one-time recipient of the award. But without further ado, here was our conversation one-on-one with South Carolina head coach Shane Beamer.
Pleasure to be joined by South Carolina head coach Shane Beamer of the South Carolina Gamecocks here at the Bear Bryant Awards. And I was here a couple years ago when your dad got honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award. Really cool. Anytime your name gets mentioned in the same light of Bear Bryant, you must be doing something right?
Yeah, no question. When I look at the list of previous winners of this award, my dad won it in 1999 after the 99 season, won the Lifetime Achievement Award a few years ago. I knew it was a big deal then for him to be part of it, and then as I look through the list of people the coaches that have won this thing, I mean, it's a who's who of college football, and it's humbling and pretty special to be here among so many great coaches currently, and then great coaches of the past as well.
2 seasons ago, I know it didn't finish the way you wanted, but last year there was a lot of optimism, a lot of what's this year going to look like? And I remember doing an interview last summer. Somebody asked, how good can LaNorris Sellers be? And I said, look, if everything clicks, he could be Johnny Manziel-like and have a huge year. And we saw some glimpses of that, of what could be with this kid. How excited are you with how this year finished, what you saw from LaNorris, and what could be next year?
Yeah, really excited. He's got such a huge upside, continues to get better. Last year at this time, nobody was talking about him. Most of the quote-unquote rankings of quarterbacks in the SEC, I think, probably had him 16 out of 16 and had us pick probably 15 out of 16 teams preseason in the SEC. LaNorris just put his head down and worked, just like our team did last year, and that's what's going to be important for him to do this year, and our entire team just continue to work. But he'll continue to get better. People forget he's still young. I mean, it's only his second year of college, being in college, period, that he just finished, and has a huge upside, great young man, poised, has all the ability in the world, and has great humility about himself as well.
We had you guys a little bit higher than that. We gave you a little bit more respect.
Right, 14?
No, a little bit higher. But did he decide no specs? He decided somewhere along the way he wanted to do away with those?
I think so. He did it early in the season, and then I think he made the decision to lose them, and whatever he did worked. I mean, down the stretch, he obviously played some really good football down the stretch.
It's interesting. I mean, you finished the season how you did, and I thought, this is my opinion. If he doesn't get hurt in the LSU game, you win that, and you guys are in the playoff. But finishing strong, you're in everybody's mind still.
Yeah.
I think that's got to help, right? As we go into next season, people are talking about you're fresh in people's minds going, oh, if this team does what they need to do, they're going to be right there at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. You want those expectations. You want to be at a place where people have high expectations for you each and every season. And we certainly have that right now. The preseason rankings going into last season, like I said, nobody had us ranked. Preseason rankings going into 2025, we're going to be ranked. I've seen some of those early ones that have us like really high. And the important thing for us, like I said, is to not pay attention to that, just continue to work. We got a lot of work to do. We lost a lot of leadership off last year's team, but there's great excitement about South Carolina football. If you look at what we've done in the past 4 seasons, the way that we've recruited, the young men that we have in our program, the success that we've had on and off the field, excitement's at an all-time high, and we're just getting started and can't wait for 2025, but even more so than that, can't wait for what's beyond that as well.
What stands out to me with your roster is how much better you guys got last year in the trenches, offensive and defensive line. We had Kyle Kennard on a few weeks ago, by the way, SEC Defensive Player of the Year, and he talked about it was the best decision he ever made, but he was so excited talking about guys like Dylan Stewart and some of the young guys. You go out and get another edge rusher from Mizzou in the portal. It seems like you guys have sent the message, like, defensive linemen, you're a big-time recruit, come play here.
Yeah, no question. We big part of our success this past season was the veterans that we had on the lines of scrimmage, on the interior of our defensive line. And we had 4 senior defensive tackles on the offensive line. We had a starting senior at center, 2 senior offensive guards. And in the SEC, as you know, it's a line of scrimmage league, and you better be good up front. And we hadn't done a good enough job, running the ball, stopping the run as well as we'd like to, consistently enough over the last 3 seasons going into this year. But did a much better job of that this year, and absolutely we've had success on the line of scrimmage. You talk about Kyle right now, or talk about Kyle Kennard last season, Dylan Stewart, our freshman, and what he did. Josiah Thompson starting left tackle for us on offense. Josiah was a freshman All-American. So we really want to attack the line of scrimmage. That's where it all starts, and like the group that we have there.
Excited to see Senior Bowl's coming up. I know you're going to have a couple guys there, as you always do, and some more high draft picks, and that helps recruiting. Last one for you. This changing landscape of NIL and all this, I've heard from multiple schools now, it's not just about when the season ends, because a kid can enter the portal, and it's like sharks in the water coming. You almost have to have those conversations before the season ends with some of those guys, right? And say, hey, look, revenue share's coming. Let's get you taken care of before these sharks can even get to you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are conversations that take place throughout the year. And you hear people say, well, you've got to constantly re-recruit your roster. And I don't look at it that way. I look at it as, you better have strong relationships with all your players 12 months a year. You better be open and honest with them 12 months a year. But certainly we didn't want to say, hey, we'll deal with all this after the season when we get to January. We were very proactive, preemptive, whatever you want to call it, in regards to our current roster before the season even ended. Because you talk about the sharks in the water. The sharks were in the water back in October with some of our players. And reaching out to them, whether it was legal or not. So we needed to be aggressive and making sure our guys wanted to be there. They know what we have, and they wanted to be there, and we wanted to make things right for all those guys. And we certainly started on that process very, very early in the season.
Yeah, somebody told me a few weeks ago, what even is tampering? I don't even know what the definition of tampering is anymore. It's a changing landscape. Coach, best of luck to you tonight, and congratulations on a great honor, and we'll talk again real soon. Best of luck going into next season.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.
All right, that's Shane Beamer. More right after this.
All right, thanks again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, more with South Carolina head coach Shane Beamer. That is coming your way here in just a second. Well, first, we'll remind you guys, today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans are unmatched. And look, you'll always remember the thrill of seeing your favorite team clinch a playoff win live. It is a memory you will never forget. And Game Time this year is making it easier to create those unforgettable moments with that new feature, Game Time Picks. Going to filter out all the fluff and show you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, and that is being there. And, of course, love the features in the Game Time app, including seat views that you could view what your seat looks like before you buy, on-time ticket delivery, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. The super deal is the best value for the event. Go take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege, get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, rolling along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. And look, I said this is going to be the Shane Beamer show. We had a one-on-one with Shane Beamer that you saw, listened to last segment. Well, more with South Carolina head coach Shane Beamer. After I chatted with Coach Beamer, he sat down with my coworkers at our radio station in Houston and figured I'd let you hear some of that conversation as got a little bit more insight from Coach Beamer on the Gamecock program and the landscape of the SEC and other questions. But they started with one of our host, Adam Clanton, fellow disgust for mayonnaise, revisiting Coach Beamer's infamous mayo bath after the Duke's Mayo Bowl several years ago.
FDA regulates that as a food is a war crime, is what that is.
Yeah, well, full disclosure, I'm not a big mayo fan.
Attaboy.
But it was,
you're already my favorite head coach.
Well, thank you. It was worth it because we won the game. But yes, the mayo. I still remember there was a point I can vividly remember with about 4 minutes left in the game where it was like, okay, we're going to win, but this is real. I'm about to get dumped with mayonnaise. You should
have thrown the game.
Yeah.
Then you could have avoided that.
We needed a win at that point to win a bowl game. But yes, I got the mayo in my head, and I got the probably concussion to go along with it.
Well, I'll ask you another a date-related question. If you know if you will be in New York, I believe it's December 13th, 2025, following this upcoming season, do you feel like you might be there with your quarterback, LaNorris Sellers?
I'm guessing that's the date of the Heisman.
That's the date of the Heisman ceremony.
I think he's got all the tools to potentially be there one day. If he is, I hope so, because it means we've had a great season next year. I really, truly believe he was playing as well as any player in the country at the end of the season for us. And he's still young. It's only his first year as a starter. It's his second year in college. But he has all the tools. He's got size. He's got athleticism. He can run. He's a great young man, smart, poised. We've put some really good players around him, I think, on offense for 2025, and we'll see what happens. Every year's different. Last year at this time, nobody knew who he was going into the season. On most of the quote-unquote rankings of the quarterbacks in the SEC, he was 16 out of 16, and life comes at you fast. So the thing for him is he blocked out all that noise last year, and we as coaches and himself, we all need to block out that noise this year as well.
When you sit here in Texas for this long, especially at any event, whether it's this or others, and you haven't recruited at least 5 people, do you break out in hives?
Yeah, well, it's January is the NCAA's limited the amount of recruiting that head coaches can do. Used to you could go out in the month of December. Well, this year no one could go out on the month of December. So for head coaches, January is really the only month of the year that you're on the road outside of going to a high school game during the season, maybe on a Friday night when you're off. So January is critical for us as coaches, and then we really only have about 3 weeks in the month to go on the road. And then as you guys know, we're dealing with it in Houston right now. We're also dealing with it back in South Carolina is weather. So all the schools are closed.
This white stuff.
Yeah, so you have this great plan of all these places you're going to go to, and then school gets wiped out, and you're like, well, that's 5 kids that I'm not going to be able to go see this month because I got to go somewhere else, and you're constantly rearranging schedules. But yes, thank God for cell phones. You can communicate, but it's one of those things that you're supposed to be on the road recruiting right now, not sitting in a hotel. And I'm blessed to be here. Don't get me wrong, but I'm probably like all the coaches that are thinking, all right, if I'm not talking to this guy, somebody else is right now.
What do you think of what the conference has in store just this upcoming season with your team heavily in the mix?
Yeah, it just continues to get better. Obviously, it was pretty strong to begin with, and then when you add Texas and Oklahoma, it only gets stronger. And what Texas has done with Coach Sarkisian is phenomenal. They've obviously been on a great run, and they're not going anywhere. And the teams around us just continue to get better. We're not going anywhere. And it's one of those. It's a league where it's just every week you have to be at your best. There's no I've been a part of other conferences, and sometimes you look at the schedule and you say, okay, that might be a little bit of a, I don't want to say breather, but, they're personnel-wise, they're not going to be the same maybe as other teams in the league. And you can't really say that in the SEC. I mean, every week when you look at the NFL draft every April, the SEC leads the nation in draft picks for like 20 straight years. Because every Saturday or every week when you start working on an opponent and you look at their personnel, there's first-round draft picks everywhere. And you're going into 90, 100,000 seat stadiums every single Saturday. So it's an awesome league to be a part of. The best of the best, in my opinion, and only getting stronger.
What was the biggest surprise in your conference this year? I mean, I know we just talked about, the Longhorns and the Sooners come aboard, but was there anything that stood out to you? I know there's always some quirky thing every single college football season. There's so much pageantry and everything that goes into it, but as you've had a chance maybe to sit back and look at 2024, the season.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Haven't been asked that one before. I think a lot of people would probably say Vanderbilt and what they did, and Diego Pavia came out of nowhere, their quarterback, or I shouldn't say out of nowhere, but in regards to the SEC.
Right.
I knew the name from following college football, and he had just beaten Auburn the year before out in New Mexico. But what they were able to do, winning early against Virginia Tech and then beating Alabama, and you say, okay, these guys are for real, and then they beat Auburn, they beat Kentucky. We went to Nashville, and a lot of times people in our league or across the country, they probably think Vanderbilt's a game, okay, that's a win. Well, we went to Vanderbilt, and that's a game against a nationally ranked Vanderbilt team that was coming off an Auburn win. So I got a lot of respect for Coach Lee, their head coach, so it's not a surprise in what he was able to do with that team. But I think no one in the SEC saw them coming. I'm pretty sure most preseason projections had them pick 16th out of 16 teams and had us pick 15 out of 15 teams. So, kudos to them and the players in our program also.
Interesting that you bring up Coach Saban. As we let you go here, my final question. We were interviewing the one SEC coach that was here last year at the Bear Bryant Awards, Eli Drinkwitz. You're here this year representing the SEC. At the time we had him on the air with us is when the news of Nick Saban's retirement broke all across everywhere, and his reaction to it was pretty legendary, that he was just, because he had noted that we just had a coaches conference call that morning, and this just kind of blew him away. And we've heard a lot of the reasons why. Nick's obviously talked about it quite a bit. What do you think about the state of college football and where it's headed, and the responsibilities that fall on you and your staff to just kind of move along with all the changes?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I worked for Steve Spurrier for 4 years when I was an assistant coach at South Carolina, and one thing he used to always tell me was just be flexible, Beamer, be flexible. And I think that's serves me well right now in college football, because literally it feels like every week, every month, every year, something is changing in regards to the rules, the recruiting calendar, transfer portal, NIL. There's a lot, and we're all going through it for the first time. My dad won this award after the 1999 season, and is here with me today, and there's not like, I can't call him and ask him, hey, how'd you handle the transfer portal back in 2001? And when you were coaching Michael Vick, what were y'all's NIL conversations like? It wasn't a thing. And we as coaches were all learning and going through it for the first time. I think we all agree there's a lot of great things about college football still. It's the greatest game in the world, in my opinion. But we also, I think, all agree that there needs to be some changes and a little bit more structure for the betterment of everyone, the student athletes, the fans, the coaches, the schools, academics, all that as well.
All right, that again, Shane Beamer. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Coming up next, we've got other big SEC topics, not just South Carolina stuff. We're moving on after this. All right, running along here, Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And guys, let's get back into it, as we got some news and notes to get to around the conference. And so as we dive right back into it, how about the Ole Miss Rebels? We will start there. Some Ole Miss news, as Austin Simmons, who projects to be Ole Miss's starting quarterback this coming season, set to take over for Jackson Dart. 6'4", 215-pounder from Miami, took a screenshot of his TV on Monday night when Ohio State beat Notre Dame for the national championship and put on the caption, "We will be here. Mark my words." Bold words from the soon-to-be starting quarterback for Ole Miss, but FanDuel giving the Rebels the 8th best odds to win the 2025 national championship. But Lane Kiffin, his attitude rubbing off on his soon-to-be starting quarterback, Austin Simmons. Lane Kiffin likes posting stuff on social media. Austin Simmons posting stuff on social media. He fits right in. How about at Texas A&M? They are reportedly adding a key piece to their defensive staff. Former James Madison defensive coordinator Lyle Hemphill going to fill a senior assistant role. He spent a season as the defense coordinator there at James Madison. Previously worked with Mike Elko at Duke back in 2022 and 2023. Joins an A&M squad that finished number 34 overall in scoring defense, 42 in rushing defense, but 90 in passing defense. So they got to improve there. But we'll see what Lyle Hemphill will do to help Texas A&M defensively. How about over at LSU? They added a special teams coordinator yesterday in Grambling special teams coordinator Aman Anand. A-N-A-N-D. It's a lot of vowels there, but he is a pretty unique coach. He will replace Slade Nagel, who left LSU following this past season for a promotion. He will go be the offensive coordinator at the University of Houston. Anand may also coach tight ends, which is what Slade Nagel is also doing at LSU, or Kelly could give that assignment to another present assistant coach. But Aman Anand, hopefully we won't be saying his name a ton this year. Hopefully LSU's special teams will be just fine, and you won't be pointing out who the special teams coordinator is. I always say that. You only know the special teams coordinator's name when special teams stinks and not doing what they need to be doing. So congrats to LSU on that hire. We'll see what he does over there for them on special teams. Speaking of assistant coaches, over at Auburn, they're zeroing in on their special teams coordinator, according to Matt Zenitz, knowing that Chad Lunsford is Auburn's target for special teams coordinator. Lunsford most recently served as an assistant coach at FAU and was previously the head coach at Georgia Southern, among other jobs. Previously, Auburn special teams were led by Tanner Burns. He was Auburn's special teams coordinator last year, but in an off-field role. And have not seen Auburn confirm the hire just yet, but all signs pointing that direction. How about over at Alabama? Joel Klatt, speaking on his podcast this week, he has Georgia firmly inside of his way too early top 10 for next season, but he's got Alabama outside of it. And he says, look, I don't know what to do with Alabama right now. Who is their quarterback? What's the standard going to be under Jalen Milroe? Of course, under Kalen DeBoer. They're losing Jalen Milroe. He declared for the NFL draft. And now you've got Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and the true freshman Keelan Russell coming in. Where does Alabama go? Klatt went on to say, I felt like it was just a down year for Georgia, and yet they navigated one of the hardest schedules in the country, won the SEC, and they were sitting there in the college football playoff quarterfinals with a backup quarterback. So, like, if we think Georgia isn't going anywhere and this is some sort of trend, I think we'll all be sorely mistaken. But Kirby Smart is far too driven. But let's face it, Bama, they're on a worse trajectory than Georgia at this point because there's more questions surrounding Alabama and their culture. The new staff, who's going to be the QB. I don't have a lot of questions for a team like Georgia, where their last 4 recruiting classes were second, first, second, and third in the country. I know they are loaded with talent. So, by the way, Georgia and Alabama will play in Athens September 27th. That will be a return trip there after Bama got the best of Georgia last season. Bama also, Kalen DeBoer, getting a C- grade from ESPN, an ESPN analyst after year 1 at Alabama. ESPN putting out their grades for college football first-year head coaches. Adam Rittenberg giving DeBoer a C-. Obviously, 4 losses, not a great first year for Kalen DeBoer. Did have that marquee win over Georgia. That was a big one. But, man, losing to Vanderbilt, losing to Oklahoma, losing Michigan in the bowl game, not great moments. Recruiting tidbit, Ole Miss did land a commitment for the class of 2026 from wide receiver Jamison Powell on Wednesday. Took to social media, had offers from Oregon, Colorado, and others. Tweeted out, I am home, hashtag hottie toddy. Comes from California. Rated 3-star prospect, the number 65 wide receiver, the number 42 player out of the state of California. And lastly, quick note here on Alabama. Nick Saban went on the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark and others this week, and the biggest regret of his coaching career, he revealed it was his decision to leave LSU for the Miami Dolphins. He said he was outside then LSU AD Skip Bertman's balcony at the football ops building, and his agent Jimmy Sexton asked him, "Your legacy, do you want to be Bear Bryant or do you want to be Vince Lombardi?" Nick Saban answered Bear Bryant. Yet Saban still proceeded to leave for the NFL and spent 2 seasons with the Miami Dolphins before deciding to get back into college football. LSU had a head coach at that time. They had hired Les Miles, and so he took the Alabama job, which was open, even after saying, "I'm not going to take the Alabama job. I'm not going to be the Alabama head coach." He would go on to spend 17 seasons there in Tuscaloosa, won 6 national championships, went on to become a coaching legend and one of the best coaches, if not the best coach of all time in college football. But sure, that's something LSU fans don't want to hear. I mean, all that success, he could have had that at LSU, right? Had he never left, he had just won a championship there in 2003. And lastly, on the way out of here, Mel Kiper put out his 2025 NFL mock draft, one of the early versions of it here in January. He projects 15 SEC stars as first-round picks this year. They have got in the top 10, Mykel Williams from Georgia, Jalen Walker from Georgia, Will Campbell, the O-lineman from LSU. Then you got Kelvin Banks, the O-lineman from Texas, Luther Burden, wide receiver from Mizzou, Malachi Starks, Georgia safety, Texas A&M defensive end Shamar Stewart, Alabama guard Tyler Booker, Alabama linebacker Jahad Campbell, Mizzou offensive lineman Armand Membu, South Carolina safety Nick Emanwari, Tennessee edge rusher James Pierce, Texas A&M defensive end Nick Scorton, and rounding out the back end, defense tackle Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, and Kentucky DB Maxwell Hairston. I mean, that would be, you're literally talking half of the first round of the NFL draft would be SEC players. Look, it's not the craziest thing. We've had a lot of years, most years with double-digit SEC guys being drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, but 15 would certainly be a ton. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out each and every day. You guys have a great weekend. For your second listen, check out Spencer McLaughlin on the Locked On College Football podcast. Does a good job there. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys on Monday. Come on back and see us. We'll have full breakdown of all the SEC big news and tidbits coming out of the weekend. Talk to you guys then. Everybody be safe.